sometimes on the show we go at stuff pretty hard. We get yelly, you
We're
know.
passionate.
We're passionate people. Um and what's cool about what we do here is that we're accountable to you all, the listener, and we got an email about just how hard we went at the Sophia in our episode about where we talked about Steve Hansen's retrospective. And so I personally learned a ton about it, and I think we just kind of wanted to take some time to talk about all the cool things we learned about the Sophia and what they do for our community that we just simply didn't know
Yeah.
and didn't talk about.
Yeah. And,
So yeah.
we were, I mean, the central thrust of what we were saying was that, some of these arts will get supported while people who have life and death needs are not being served. And, that's kind of a central theme that even like our friend who messaged the show about this was like, yeah, that is a problem, right? He also mentioned that, you know, they are struggling, and if they don't, every arts institute is struggling, and so they're just trying their best to get by as well.
Mhm.
Shannon, what were some of the things that you learned? You said you went on a big deep dive today.
I did go on I went on a deep dive, and then I was like, take all my money, which is not a lot of money. But I did, so I was reminded on my deep dive, and I'm going to disclose something about myself that may get me unfriended by Kempa and Skylar, that I am a huge fan of The West Wing. And
A good show.
Danny Concannon, Timothy Busfield actually started the B Street Theater in its original form in 1986. And when it first began, its focus was a touring theater company for children.
Mm-hmm.
And it was known as Theater for Children Incorporated. And the Sophia has continued that work up through its present day, and just does all kinds of arts education for kids. And through the pandemic, they are doing quite a bit virtually for the community. Um, they just finished up. There was actually something tonight, I think, where it's a virtual production centering Black artists. So you could, reserve yourself a space there. Um, and that the Sophia in its current form on Capitol has really created a space for them to go from serving, some, I think in the email it said from serving 20,000 kids in their best year with, this touring theater company to being able to serve 20,000 kids over like 2 plays or so.
Right.
Like they are just, the capacity to serve people has really grown. And that the capacity has been built by the community, by people who really give of their last, and also give a lot, because there's those folks too, right?
Right.
um yeah, and I think a couple of the things that were really cool to me were the initiatives around like improv for adults on probation, which was mentioned in the email, and arts education to reduce recidivism, just like shit that I had no fucking clue they did. I genuinely was like, this is some shit that Steve Hansen's down with, and therefore I don't like it.
Yeah. I actually just now wanted to make a joke about how everyone who does improv is an asshole, but I'm like, wait, we're staying positive.
We're staying positive. We're staying positive. It is, and it is hard to stay positive in that too, because like the whole time, I mean, I was like in the beginning went into it and was like, well, of course Steve likes this, and of course, and then it's like slowly starts like chip away at my black heart, and I'm like, oh my god, this is really cool. Like, They're doing some super cool shit.
Yeah. So I'm glad we got to talk about that a little.
Yeah. I mean, I have absolutely no problem with the work that is happening. And I also just want to point out that like I respect and appreciate that it costs money to put on shows and that artists deserve to be paid. And so I totally get that. And so I know I made a comment about, the cost of admission not always being accessible. And one of the things that we certainly learned is that there are more inexpensive $12 and $9 seats that are available, as well as discounts for children to be able to help bring the arts and make them more accessible to communities. So I think it's important that we point that out. I think it's also important that we respect the fact that it costs money to put these things on, and that they certainly can use some support. I think the broad, conversation about how the best thing we can do for the arts is to make sure that people can afford to live and can have their basic needs met, because I think there are a lot of artists out there who don't get to live as artists and work as artists because they have to find other ways to support themselves because we don't have enough of a way to do that. So that's just one thing that I think is just incredibly important to point out. The other thing that I have always had a really critical eye for is the way in which, like most industries, the arts end up having equity issues, especially racial equity issues. And so, I have, even though I'm not in the arts, I have really pushed back on this when I've seen it happen. Even a few years ago, there was a letter that was sent to the city on behalf of all of the organizations in the city that have budgets over $500,000 a year, and that left out places like Celebration Arts and other Black-owned, artist groups that didn't have that income. And so when I pushed back on it, it was like, well, that was the amount that was chosen. And I was like, and by doing so, you are deliberately and institutionally excluding, these other groups that also have a stake in what's happening here. And that can be part of the problem.
Systemically racist and classist.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so and that's not the B Street Theater's responsibility or the Sophia Theaters or any of them, but it's more so just a collective reminder that even when we're talking about, how much money you need and, what's not happening, that there are other groups that are also serving communities that are doing lots of outreach and are doing lots of, artist development and all of that, who have even lower budgets than yours, so much so that they're not even included on advocacy and outreach things because they are not, at the same level. And I think that's important also to point out in terms of who gets the ongoing support, even when it is, small in comparison to our operating budgets. And so just wanting to also remind us that these institutions look exactly like all the other ones, and that it's often, there's often these patterns that we see.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a conversation we should keep having here
Absolutely.
on the show. I do know that our most famous museum over the last couple of years has had a couple of somewhat public, real issues that people have called them out, people who are respected with major concerns they had. And I'm not going to dive into that right now. I don't want to have to do another mea culpa intro next week. But these are bigger conversations that I think need to be continued to be had. So I guess just the final note on the Sophia, they are planning to keep their tech lab operational in 2021. This tech lab was created by them to help sort of ameliorate the problem of the technological gap that people suffer from, particularly during the COVID era. And again, that falls along class and race lines. And, some kids that might be learning from a tent, they work to provide them not just hardware, but also a safe space to do some of their classwork. So if you want to help them and continue to do that in 2021 in any way you can, reach out to Blake over at B Street. That's B Gillespie at bstreettheater.org. BGILLESPIE at B Street Theater, that's RE at the end.org. All right.
Yeah. Before we're done with this, I would just like to say thanks to the person who wrote to point out that we kind of overlooked a lot of this stuff, and encourage other people, like, as we go through the show, like if we're off on stuff, like, let us know. We don't like all feedback is appreciated, whether it's like positive reinforcement or like stuff that we're fucking up on. Yeah, I mean, we're appreciate all the feedback. Thank you for taking the time to write to us and giving us a chance to get it right. So
Yeah, definitely.
ditto.
Thank you.
all right, you guys want to do the show, get some more whack takes out of the way?
Let's
do
get
it.
them whack takes.
Get some hate mail.
Perfectly whack takes. Perfectly whack
The
takes.
most perfect whack takes.
Always said the things they said. Always said some from those dead. All the voices heard. Always said things we say. Always said they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Skylar.
And Shannon.
And flow.
And this is our final free episode of 2020. Wow. Feeling good about that. Wow. Been quite a year.
I mean, has it though?
I mean, it's it's been
Every
here.
year's kind of
Every year's the same thing every time.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Mm-hmm. I definitely don't have significantly more white hair from the stressors of the year.
You have significantly more hair in general.
Yes.
I do.
Yeah.
Some of it's just going to be white, so yeah.
And I have significantly less.
My hair is almost as
I
it's
definitely have
possibly
more.
as long as yours now, Flo.
Yeah, it is. And I started the year off with a lot of hair, and I have been chopping it off myself since, because I am the opposite, where like my hair is long when other people can take care of it, and when nobody else can, it has to go. And other people grow their hair out when nobody else can take care of it. So
It's been fun growing it out, but I'm finally at a point where it's like sufficiently annoying more than twice a day, where it falls in my face if I don't like have to like tie it up somehow or have a hat on, or like directly after a shower, if you wash it, then it's just like it's all fucking wet.
yeah.
Weird.
Apparently your hair
Is that
gets
how
That's
it
why
works?
you got to wrap
Yeah.
one of those towels around your head,
Yeah.
That's why they
Okay.
do it. Yeah.
All
Yourself up.
right.
That's why they do it.
That's why they do that shit.
Now, do you have
And
a
if you have
separate
hair-
head towel?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You have a head
You can
towel.
have a separate head towel so it doesn't break your hair.
And it's also helpful if it's a really hyper absorbent one. I like the ones
right,
that people
correct.
put over their hot yoga mats.
You want to
because
think
they're
in
intended so that way they're super absorbent, and so by the time you take it down, it's mostly sucked up a lot of the water.
Okay.
you want to go into in the region of like the ShamWow
Yep.
for your
Got it.
hair towel needs, for your hair drying needs.
This is extremely helpful, revolutionary, and
This is also not on the agenda
yeah.
for tonight's show.
But just in lieu of like a his and hers towel, I'm gonna have like a head and everything else towel.
We're like,
Correct, yes.
if we have to
Yes.
we've got to do an opener on the Sophia, so we're gonna do like a cold open after we
The
introduce
post-opener,
ourselves.
Yeah. No, let's actually get started with the show. To begin, just a quick update. Some really good news after all the organizing to save the folks at Hawthorne Suites. Shannon, can you give us a little update?
Our friends at Ezralow Co. out of Calabasas, California.
Friends of the show,
Friends of the show,
Ezra Lowe.
obviously. We had let everybody know a couple shows ago that they had given out eviction notices to the residents of the Hawthorne Suites just off of Richards Boulevard. Problematic for many reasons, but the update for that is that they have rescinded those eviction notices as of the 23rd of December.
Incredible.
It's great news. It's like an incredible organizing win, really, because folks went for it, right? Like they heard that this shit was happening and they went for it. This is also council member Katie Valenzuela and Jeff Harris worked together on trying to get this shit, you know, trying to fuck shit up so that people don't get evicted, you know, in the middle of the fucking winter. So we can also, if we're going to start tallying successes for council member Valenzuela at a District 4, we can start giving those tallies.
That's a good point.
Also,
Count it.
folks, counting it.
Katie won, everyone else 0.
Katie won, the rest of yous, you're a bunch of losers, except for
You suckers and you losers.
we're going for them.
This
It's a great
scintillating
show.
commentary.
Kyler's like, I'm gonna go, I'll be back later. Also, everybody got $50 gift cards to a Mexican restaurant, so
That's pretty cool.
I just want to be like, God damn it, Ezralow, like I mean, that's cool, but $50,
Right.
like, I don't know.
After we put you through the worst stress of
Yeah.
possibly
Right.
your life. for
we
the last month.
we traumatized you,
Yeah.
but here's $50, go get a
Here's
burrito.
$50. Enjoy Yeah.
Oh man, from where I'm sitting,
Fajita.
$50 to buy burritos with sounds pretty good. But-
Get
It's
a
a good
giant
number of, I mean, that's at
enchilada.
least like 4 garnacha burritos.
It's to Maya Mexican restaurant. I'm not sure if that's the Maya on Broadway. If it is, they should definitely get a michelada because they're delish. Anyway,
Mhm.
I'm gonna stop.
Yeah,
Good
so
news.
that's all good news. And not just a shout out to Katie. I think we also want to stress the people power, you know,
Yes,
the Sacramento Eviction Defense Network. This is a number of groups that were already existing and have come together to say fucking enough with evictions, and we're here to help folks. I think that's a huge win for them. And so again, you know, my reminder to folks is organize. Go join them. See how you can help, because you organize, then you fight, and then you get wins like this. So congrats, everyone.
Yeah.
Look at
Well, shall
that.
we move on?
Yeah.
Yes, we're just
Sure.
Yeah.
go just check those boxes.
Well, you know, credit where it's due. The mayor has recently said that he wanted to open the warming centers for folks experiencing homelessness earlier than originally considered. We are now getting close to game time on figuring out if that was real talk or not. Shannon, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can.
You don't seem very very
Well,
optimistic.
This is one of those things that I think it's important to note that yes, credit where credit's due, but let's also not forget that the credit was given on December 15th when this announcement was made.
Mhm.
And it's now when you're listening to this, it'll be December 29th, and warming centers have yet to be open for people experiencing homelessness in our community.
Right.
So that is, I think it's an important criticism, and it's an important thing to draw attention to. So yes, the mayor did announce that he would be opening up a warming center for the city, which would be the first warming center that the city has opened in, I believe, 4 years, because generally this is a county thing. The county is responsible for opening up warming centers. And the issue with the county is that they require 3 consecutive nights below 32 degrees. So
Mhm.
32 degrees or less. 3 consecutive nights as forecasted by the National Weather Service. And the thing about the city warming center was that it would be if there was a temperature forecasted below 33 degrees, there was no like consecutive night situation, just if it was forecasted below 33 degrees. And there would be 60 beds at the Galleria, plus 60 trailers at Cal Expo, plus I believe it was 50 motel vouchers that would be available to people for 3 nights at a time.
That's a
And
significant number of people. Like it's anywhere near everyone, but that's a lot of people who would be cold and endangered for those consecutive nights that would no longer be.
Totally. And especially, as I think I've mentioned on the show before, and certainly others have as well, during the course of this pandemic, we have seen that vulnerable people experiencing homelessness have just not received the support from our city or county that they should, right?
Mhm.
Because rather than giving people the support that they should get during this time, our county decided to fund the sheriff's department. So I think, so anyway, we have this forecast. The National Weather Service has forecasted temperatures to drop to, it's supposed to frost tonight, actually. Tomorrow night, the same. And the big question all day was, will that warming center at the Galleria open? That's 60 beds. Using precaution, those beds would be placed 12 feet apart with glass or plexiglass partitions between them. There would be mask requirements. All kinds of precautions would be in place for people. And we received no word that the warming center would be open.
Mhm.
And the mayor himself has actually not spoken on his social media platforms about the possibility of those warming centers opening since the first announcement, where it was like, come give me high fives and all that. I think it's important to remember that to us, I mean, a 33-degree night is a damn cold night for people in Sacramento. But so is a 40-degree night.
Right.
And
Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
for a person experiencing homelessness,
Yeah.
a 45-degree night, even a 50-degree night, if there is dew, if there was rain, if it's windy,
Right.
there's any number of circumstances that create inclement weather for people and create extreme vulnerability for them, especially if they are already living with any number of other conditions.
Absolutely.
And there needs to be, I think that the regulation that the mayor has put in place, which is 33 degrees, as opposed to what the Office of Emergency Services says, is good, but it's not enough. It's okay. It's not even good, in my opinion. Sorry, I
And
know Flo's like
just
itching
yeah,
to
I was gonna
some
say
stuff.
I was just to back you up in there, because one of the things, like if we're looking at like the human biology studies, it's that cold weather injuries can start at over 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is considered to not be like low, that's considered to be like low cold stress, and they consider 32 to 55 degrees to be moderate cold stress, and then high cold stress to be when it drops below freezing. But the likelihood of hypothermia, which is when you're experiencing health impacts because your body is too cold, it increases over 50% for every 10-degree drop there is in temperature, and for every 1 millimeter increase there is in precipitation. So I just think that's really important to point out, because like you were saying, 40 degrees is well, 55 degree, I mean, you can experience the impact of weather over 55 degrees, especially if there's precipitation, and especially for people who have spent prolonged periods outside, because you've already been susceptible to the literal weathering impact of being outside. And so that takes a toll on your immune system. It takes a toll on all of your, your organ systems, and just your general responsiveness to, things that you may be able to withstand if you were housed on a regular basis. So I just wanted to back you up, Shannon, with some data on like why this is so important and just how bad it is.
And there's a lot of us advocates who have talked about the various different ways that we could change the criteria for opening warming centers or cooling centers in the summer. But since it's wintertime, we talk about warming centers specifically. And one of the things is going by like a feels like temperature gauge, which is offered in most, like the National Weather Service. It'll say it's 40 degrees, but in some cases it feels like it's 32 degrees because of any
Right.
number of extra conditions that
chill.
are
Right.
that are
Yep.
out there. And so maybe that's what we should be using. Maybe we should just say that if it's under 40 degrees for 3 consecutive nights, that is something that we should consider. Maybe we should start considering things like precipitation. There's any number of things that could really go into making guidelines that actually like center people's health and well-being, that really we just find our city and county, by not acting, they are saying that they don't care, and the bureaucracy involved in trying to get people simply sheltered for the night. We're not even asking for long-term shelter when we're talking about warming centers. We're asking to save people from the weather outside,
Right.
because it is too extreme for them to survive it. There's just so much red tape in the time that since the mayor announced the opening of this warming center that has yet to open. I have had 2 guests die outside. That is like, was it weather related? I don't know, but the weather certainly didn't help.
Right.
And
Right.
and we can always say that in the winter time. I have 2 people who are living with, like, one woman has cancer, another woman is in her mid 70s, and she's in and out of the hospital because she can't get shelter. And the only thing she can get are a couple nights in a motel every now and again, or a fucking week in the hospital because of like near exposure, right? Like,
Right.
it's fucking ridiculous that we can't manage to do more.
Yeah. And it shows you how this is life or death. We're not, again, just screaming. We're not really screaming this episode. But there are real lives at stake. People Shannon knows and sees and loves every day, right? And it's fucking bullshit. And this red tape, there's a part of me that's not even sure if it's real or not. Like, it's just a thing that our local politicians can hide behind
Totally.
and just be like, like Phil Cerna, like, listen, I'm on your side. I want to help with this too, but my hands are tied.
Right.
You wonder how much you can believe them. So,
well, part of that I wanted to ask you, Shannon. I read an article about this earlier, and they mentioned that Sacramento, like, obviously, like part of a problem with a warming or a cooling center this year, right, is that you're also putting a bunch of people who may be immunocompromised or like whatever under the same roof in an indoor setting, which is obviously there's like a coronavirus problem with that, right? Which I think like to me, that's where a lot of the red tape comes from, right? Is people being like, well, like the city and the county can't be responsible for like spreading COVID-19 around our unhoused population. In the article, which whatever, like that is what it is. And obviously, if there's people dying on the street, then there's like obvious priorities at stake here, and it's not really like, in my view, it's not super justifiable to not act based on those premises. But in the article, they mentioned that Sacramento's unhoused population actually has like way lower COVID numbers than a lot of other California cities. And I want, like, they don't really expound on that. And I was wondering, Shannon, if you can kind of speak to why our unhoused population is having like such an easier time COVID wise than some cities like San Francisco or LA.
I mean, I'm not a public health official, but I can say anecdotally, based on the work that I do with the population that I serve, people experiencing homelessness tend to physically distance and isolate in ways that are like fucking best practice models for the people of El Dorado Hills. Like, because they stay in their, like, in their germ bubble, right? Like, you stay with your street
Quarantine.
family,
Yeah.
you stay with your quarantine, like, you're not really letting other people into your space. When you are going out into public spaces, you're probably going to a space that is that has activated lots and lots of precaution, because they are thinking about you, the person experiencing homelessness, as the most vulnerable, because you are potentially immunocompromised, or because you are potentially living with any number of other illnesses. So I think what we find here in Sacramento is that our community has been so unfriendly and inhospitable to people experiencing homelessness that the rate of isolation and the rate of quarantining sort of just naturally happened before COVID even came into our community.
Yeah.
So by the time that it did, people were like, well, I'm not fucking going anywhere because I don't want to get sick. You know, the numbers of people, I mean, I spent my day at one of the largest organizations serving people experiencing homelessness, and the number of people who have tested positive are, like, I could count them on maybe two hands, right? Like, it's not, this isn't, we just haven't seen this issue. The other thing that we have to remember is that Sacramento refuses to provide shelter for people. So as they do not provide congregate living spaces, that we aren't seeing the infection rate go up. And I don't want people to hear that and say we shouldn't be providing shelter for people.
Right.
Because the reality is that HUD has given us good, better, and best practice models for providing congregate living situations for people experiencing homelessness during this pandemic. Additionally, we have people like Flo, for example, who has spent an enormous amount of her life getting educated on the spread of infectious disease, and she could talk to service providers, and we can use her expertise and the expertise of hundreds of epidemiologists throughout the country, throughout the fucking world, and figure out ways to shelter people that are safe. The other thing, and I think the last point, is in Sacramento in particular, as we have seen our downtown really just be sort of tamped down by the virus. And even before, we have buildings that are completely empty and not being used, that we have never actually looked at as assets for our vulnerable populations. We could certainly have congregate living spaces that offer shelter for people, that offer fucking housing for people, that would use all of those empty spaces. And really, like, ideally what we want in this situation is, fuck shelter, let's get people housed during COVID, because housing ends their homelessness, right? And make sure that we have plenty of support services for them. But once you're in housing, like, be it a tiny home, be it like an SRO situation, that's your space, and then you can quarantine even better. Like,
Right.
So it's a very long-winded answer to your question to say, because of our negligence, the community of people experiencing homelessness in Sacramento have quarantined very well, is my experience.
I want to move on to the next topic, but Flo, do you, as a public health professional, do you have anything to add to that answer?
I mean, just that Shannon is 100% right. Like, there's a way to do this. And especially when it comes to, pulling people together and choosing how to house them. We already know that people are in groups already of people who are kind of their quarantine bubble. And so, being able to allow them to shelter together and find ways, if you can't have individual, housing units, to be able to have the people who are already, kind of moving together, living together, is a great way to be able to address that. The other thing I would say that's probably unfortunately been helpful is that we know that the virus doesn't spread as quickly when people are outside. So, part of the reason why Sacramento's rates are probably so low is because we've done such a terrible job of housing people.
Right.
And so that's the only like, I don't even want to call it an upside because it sounds really callous and it's really kind of inaccurate, but that's probably the reason why they're lower than they are in other places, is because we haven't housed people. And so taking advantage of, like, if you already have a low rate, then when you go to house people, it's a lot easier to be able to keep the infection rate low, especially when people already have good practices. So I think all of those things are working in our favor if we actually have the political will to be able to do more about this. And there are absolutely existing solutions to be able to address this, including the fact that we have tons of vacant buildings that are sitting empty because people can't go to work. And certain parts of them could certainly be turned into shelter, whether it's for warming centers or just, for longer term, especially for those that don't plan to return to having their offices operating as usual.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you to both of you. My big takeaway on this topic is that we might have had the first imperfect take ever on the show when I said credit where it's due to Mayor Steinberg at the beginning of this. I guess I'm too much in nice mode now.
We started nice.
I know. I always want to give credit where credit's due to him, because we spend so much time trashing him on the show that I want, in like the interest of appearing to be like fair and like, what's the word I'm looking for?
We definitely don't want to say fair and balanced.
Yeah, no, not fair and balanced, but like impartial about like our criticism or whatever. I'm always looking for things to be like, all right, man, like, good job. You did this pretty good. Like, I'm with you, or like this to me. I was like, all right, Daryl's like pretty good. Then Shannon's like, actually, no. It's like,
I watched her face sour as I said it, and I was like, damn it.
I know.
But again, folks, the call to action is call and agitate Mayor Steinberg and your city council member and those at the county level. These services, it's possible to get these services for folks. As they both said, there are empty spaces not being used right now that could protect people. There are real life answers here that real life professionals like the two, folks on our show have been fucking hammering away at forever. So that's the call to action. Anything else we want to add on that? All right. Well, let's move on. Let's do a little update on coronavirus. We have the vaccines flowing into the state. Finally. We have our medical professionals getting their first rounds of it. By the end of this week, Governor Newsom said we will have had in total nearly 1.8 million vaccines brought in, which I guess you divide by 2. I think that's how this goes, because you got to get 2. But that's going to get a lot of our frontline workers and a lot of our most, oldest and most vulnerable communities protected. So, Flo, can you talk to us a little bit about that update and what's going on?
Sure. So I think we've already talked about this on the show, but Pfizer and Moderna both have coronavirus vaccines that have been approved under the emergency use authorization. And what that means is that they're not fully approved by the FDA. They still have to go through the process of continuing their ongoing studies, but they are approved for emergency use. And so that's why they're able to roll them out and be able to extend far beyond just their initial trial population. And so the state is expected, as Dave mentioned, to get about 1.8 million doses by the end of the year. And so, and most people are going to be expected to have 2 doses within 3 to 4 weeks, depending on which vaccine that they'd be getting. And so there is a rollout plan that is starting with our health professionals and then moving to those who are in long-term care facilities. They are part of phase 1A of the vaccine distribution plan. And so the healthcare workers have already been part of that. And so they started in mid-December. And then we believe that in January, it will likely begin to extend to long-term care facilities throughout the state. And that CVS and Walgreens are supposed to be assisting in the outreach for that. The other big things to know in terms of COVID cases are that we, statewide, we're essentially at 0% in terms of our availability of ICU beds. We talked a little bit about the places where that capacity is 0. Locally in Sacramento, we've been sort of hovering around that 15% benchmark that was used to trigger whether or not we went into the 3-week special shutdown. We've been somewhere between anywhere between like 13 and 16%. So we're hovering right around it. So depending on what happens over the next few weeks, will determine whether or not we end up cycling out of that 3-week extra precaution status we were in, or whether we stay in it. The Bay Area is a little lower than us. They've been hovering around 9 to 10%. And so essentially what that means, though, is that places like Kaiser already confirmed over last weekend that they're going to be postponing some of their elective and non-urgent surgeries because they need to make sure that they're keeping hospital beds available to deal with COVID.
Right.
So
there's plenty of reason to be concerned that there will be a surge post-Christmas.
Right. Yes, that's the other thing I was going to mention, and I'm glad Dave brought it up, is that we were beginning to see some dulling of the effect of Thanksgiving, we assume, in that week before Christmas. But it seems as if at least over 1 million people have traveled over the course of the holiday. Maybe not all of them were going to see family. Some of them may have just been going off to an Airbnb or somewhere by themselves where they were able to safely shelter. But we are expecting that between Christmas and New Year's celebrations that there may be an uptick in cases. And we are already twice the peak that we had during the first wave peak this summer in terms of number of cases that we're experiencing statewide and as well as number of deaths. So this is not to take lightly. We really need to all be doing what we can to really stem the spread of this, and in hopes that we are not going to lose so many more people in the process.
Yeah, it's there's good news, but it's also go time, and it's kind of scary right now.
Yep.
You mentioned both of the A, or I guess 1A, you mentioned that the rollout there. During his press conference today, Governor Newsom described 1B and 1B. It has 2 tiers. I just want to give into the details of that. That will probably start sometime later in January. For folks, I just want you all, listeners, to know what they are. 1B tier 1, and this all sounds ridiculous, but 1B tier 1 will be folks who are 75 and older. It will be workers in education and childcare, emergency services, food, and agriculture.
Yep.
Phase 1B tier 2 will be folks who are 65 and older with an underlying health condition and or a disability, workers in transportation and logistics, industrial, residential, and commercial sectors, critical manufacturing, incarcerated individuals, which honestly, that one should be higher, and folks who are experiencing homelessness, as should that one.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think the 1A and 1B is like getting, and then having multiple tiers. It's just like, why don't we just number this? and say
Right.
who's in which group. Like 1B tier 2, really?
I like that system. I like it.
No, I just
Clear
are
as
all of them
day.
going to be 1? Is everybody a top tier? They don't want anybody to be in tier 2, so they're just
If
calling
anything,
it
they
like,
should add colors to it, like
I think they
1B
should
tier
assign
1
emojis.
green.
Mauve.
Yeah. It makes it so confusing. But yeah, I mean, I think that there could obviously be, you know, a critique of who's in what tier in terms of the need for vaccination, especially when we're having conversations about not wanting to house more people because we're concerned about COVID infection. That feels like a really pressing need, and that if we could get, you know, more of our unhoused folks vaccinated, then that would not be a problem, because like even our Meadowview shelter right now is at 50% capacity to be able to try to stem the spread of COVID. And that could be addressed if we could get more people vaccinated, because the one thing we know from the vaccine trials, at least thus far, is that within 14 days of the first dose, we start to already see a difference in terms of who contracts the virus. And you're considered to have protection between 7 and 14 days after the second dose. So it doesn't take that long, especially since people are getting, you know, both of their doses within 3 and 4 weeks, that you could be, you know, 5 to 6 weeks out and have somebody with full protection. And so that seems like a real priority in terms of getting people housed.
Yeah.
Safely housed, especially.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to add on this topic?
I have like a little bit of good news. In Flo, I don't know if I've had a chance to talk to you about this yet, but I have actually had a fair amount of success in my bathtub making my own vaccine.
Nope.
And,
Oh my God.
Nope. And I was prepared for this.
Now let's hear.
Yeah, no, I'm just I'm interested in serving the community, and I realize that there is like a queuing issue, and that some people who are vulnerable may need to have better access to a vaccine. So I just wanted to launch the news that I've got that dialed in. I've been mainlining my bathtub vaccine for a week now, and I feel great. So I think we're ready. Not FDA approved. There is an asterisk.
Not anything approved. It's not approved by his landlord, let alone.
It is Kempa approved.
I approve it.
I
knew Shannon would approve it.
A little of Grandpa's old cough medicine in it.
No.
Pure unadulterated light. You just put that straight into your body.
No.
And
a little bit of cat hair.
And really, those are a little bit of cat hair. Really, those are the 3 main ingredients.
Pet dander is an important part of it.
Moderna can start with allergens.
Skylar can do it in 1.
That's right.
I really love that before we even started recording and we brought up, you know, a different thing in this same vein, Flo was like, nope, not doing this with y'all tonight.
Not today.
And then not today, not
Satan.
doing this today. Not today. She said it like 6 times, and Skylar waited until 45 minutes into the podcast to throw it in such a way that I was like, oh shit, Skylar did his fucking homework. What's the question?
I was bracing myself for something reasonable, but also preparing myself for it not to be reasonable.
As soon as I heard bathtub, I was like, oh fuck, this is going a different direction.
I would just like to point out that having pet dander and cat hair is a major allergy issue. And so for all those people out there worried about their allergies to the actual vaccine components, definitely don't take Skylar's bathtub vaccine because it has known allergens.
The light and the alcohol.
But the virus is allergic to the pet dander.
Right.
Oh,
so you might die, but so does the virus.
So does the virus.
Totes worth it.
I no, absolutely not.
Also, here I'm just gonna say too.
Science.
I'm going to say right now that given the way that vaccines work, if you were to just like put a little bit of pet allergens into your bloodstream, it would probably cure your pet allergy, right?
Yeah.
Like isn't that
bleach,
that's how
and hydrochloroquine and what else?
Yeah, what's that?
I'm no chemist.
5G.
What's that
5G
pseudoscience thing where you put like 1 in 5 million parts of a thing in that you're allergic to, and then you eat it and then or drink it and then you're fine?
Yeah. That's what I'm working with.
That's
here.
what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
Let's
right
just
to me.
go. Let's test our immune systems out in this particular way. This is a good use. We should all take up a smoking habit while we're at it.
I actually
Okay.
have. So yeah,
Already
I'm
done.
on it.
Definitely live near a freeway because the air there is really great.
Oh, got one right
you
here.
know, yeah.
Let's shelve this conversation.
Patreon
All right.
app.
Don't do
All
any
right,
of this
everyone.
at home.
And
Don't do this at home. That is my disclaimer. That is
folks at
sarcasm.
home,
Don't do any of this at home.
you know how to contact us. If you want to be part of our
Clinical trials.
I will not stay a part of this if we are selling Skylar's vaccine in the Voices River City store. I just want everybody to know this. And I don't care if you're giving it away for free. When I said universal health care, this is not what I had in mind, okay?
Yeah,
We've opened up a store, everybody.
Coming soon.
Skylar's-
Skylar's miracle vaccine.
Oh my god. Okay.
No.
I wanted to do one, like, we don't have much time, but I wanted to touch on this one thing real quick because it's been all over the news the last week. Governor Gavin Newsom has filled Senator Harris's California Senate seat. Obviously, she is the vice president-elect, sorry. And he has filled that seat with the former California Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. This has really surprised a lot of folks in the Black community because, I mean, it takes the number of Black women in the Senate from 1 to 0, basically. And then also to fill Padilla's empty Secretary of State seat, it almost seemed like as sort of a consolation prize to the Black community, he has appointed Dr. Shirley Weber, the assembly member, to the Secretary of State position. I mean, Flo, you're kind of the policy guru on here. Can you give some reflections on this?
Yeah, there was a big push, and Dr. Weber was actually at the forefront of that push to be able to, keep the seat that Kamala Harris occupied with a Black woman. And so, there were several folks who had been floated out as, great, options for that, mostly members, of the California congressional delegation, who could, serve in that capacity. And so I think,
like the lone vote against the Iraq war.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have options already here. And so there was a big push to keep the seat. And especially because of how instrumental Black women as a voting bloc and as a political bloc had been in getting, Biden and Harris into office in the first place.
Right.
And so there, that certainly wasn't just California, but that was, nationwide. And so I think it's not at all well-kept secret that Gavin Newsom wants to run for president at some point. And so there has been a feeling of like, we won't forget this, especially because, there was always an appreciation for the fact that California is almost 50%, Latino. And so that makes up the population here. But also recognizing that, Kevin De Leon ran against Dianne Feinstein, and at the tender age of 85, she decided she was not willing to, she was going to run for that seat again and throw real weight behind it, right?
Tender age of 85.
Yeah. So the idea that there's not any Latino representation in, from California and hasn't been in the past is not because for lack of trying or for lack of qualified candidates. It is for stonewalling by establishment Democrats who were unwilling to, to offer an opportunity and a path forward for that. So that's a first thing that needs to be pointed out. And then now we are faced with Dianne Feinstein possibly having some cognitive having some cognitive delays or declines that make it so that she may not even be able to do her job well.
Right.
And so
and that's
I think
been widely reported in like Politico. It's sort of an open secret.
Yeah.
And this has been, we sort of live in a country that it's kind of a gerontocracy, because our national level politics are all sort of people end up in positions of power by seniority. So you never give up your seat. And until we break that, we are going to have a Dianne Feinstein. We are going to have, these old racists like Strom Thurmond in there for fucking ever. Right. Keep going. I'm sorry, Flo.
Yeah, I mean, so that's really become the concern. It's like, now it's, the Black delegation and sort of the Brown delegation kind of at odds with each other, in part because, there's this perceived scarcity of resources, but what's really happened is that the same party that, everybody has sort of, decided, I guess, by default that that is really their only option, has not done right by either group. And so, but then it makes it seem as if we're fighting against each other. And there's this idea of like keeping the seat versus true representation. Like, this country deserves to have a Congress that is filled with people who represent the diversity of America. And while we haven't quite gotten there in terms of class, at minimum, we could at least get there in terms of racial and ethnic experience, because we do understand just how much that shapes people's lived experience. And so the idea that, in choosing, it's the first Latino from California, but not the only, Latino man who is in the Senate, versus taking the only Black woman nationwide who's in that seat, whose seat isn't even, expired yet, and replacing her just feels like a gut punch. And I think, I think Newsom will likely have this to contend with when he's on a national stage trying to, get the Democratic Party's nomination for president.
Right. I mean, everything you're saying makes complete sense. What I was hoping to see in that seat getting filled, when I said the one vote against the Iraq war, I actually meant the one post 9/11 vote against sort of use of force by the U.S. government in Congress, when we were all, going, like, what's going on post 9/11. That's Barbara Lee, the congresswoman from California, who is just fantastic. I think she would have been great for that Senate role. As you mentioned, Dr. Weber was a name folks were throwing around for the Senate seat as well. I mean, she's pretty great too. She's pretty amazing.
And they were more, she was really leading the charge and just at least keeping the seat. I know her name had been floated, but mostly, you were hearing Barbara Lee and Karen Bass as being the main ones that people were kind of putting their weight behind filling Kamala's seat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let me put a little positive light on the Padilla pick. Our Senate, before this election, before November 2020, had 4 Latinos in it. That is in no way proper representation for the Latino community. 3 of those 4 were Cubans, and thus conservative. I mean, pretty right-leaning folks. So we started with 3 Cubans and 1 Cuban American, sorry. And so 1 Mexican American is definitely not representative of that community in the US. And we've gone from 1 now to 3 because another Mexican American, I believe in Nevada, was recently elected. I think that's positive representation within the Latino community. I think you're also correct at what cost, right?
Yeah. So, and I'm excited for the Latino community. Like, the Latinx community now has this opportunity to be represented for the first time in history. And I want people to feel comfortable celebrating that and being really excited about it. And, I think, Padilla has done really great work as Secretary of State in helping to really expand, the voting access to many Californians. And so that is certainly commendable and laudable. And so this is less about, who he is, and more so the fact that, like, women are underrepresented in Congress, and in particular, Black women are underrepresented. And so this idea that, that this seat had to come at a cost, I think is part of just the frustration, right? It's like it's sort of what happens, I think, to a lot of Black and Indigenous and other people of color all the time, which is that like, hey, we have 10 job openings, and then we're going to make all of the people of color fight over one of them, and we're going to ignore the other 9 that could have been open and could have been available. Like, everybody should have had access to all of them. There shouldn't be the expectation that we're going to hire one person of color, so let everybody fight it out. And that's sort of how this has felt, is that like, keep your hand off of Di-Fi's seat. This, right. Everybody duke it out over this one. And it's like, that one should have been, up for a real race and a real run last time. And it certainly should be up now that it's questionable if she's even able to continue doing her job.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. This seat, in my opinion, for whatever that's worth, it should have gone to a Black woman. I don't know why you fuck with the demographics of the Senate in that regard, but Padilla has been deeply loyal to Newsom. Newsom is a kind of guy that rewards that sort of thing. I will say that, I wish that had gone to a Barbara Lee, and that Di-Fi, the leaders of the party have to get her to step down soon. Like, she's not properly able to represent her constituency or serve in her role anymore. And as soon as she steps down, originally it had the other one been filled by a Barbara Lee, I would have said, let's get, I don't know. I would say like a labor champion like Lorena Gonzalez in the other one or something, but right. But don't make it to the detriment of the community whose ancestors were literal slaves building this nation.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess is there anything else we want to cover on that?
No.
All right.
No, I'm just disappointed, Gavin. Yeah. Once again, I'm disappointed that racism isn't a public health issue. I'm disappointed that you vetoed, the bill that came before you that would have made MH First a pilot throughout the state. I'm just disappointed. Yeah, I'm disappointed in your lack of commitment to, housing the unhoused, addressing children's issues, equity issues in general. I'm disappointed you for going to French Laundry to have a high-end meal in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I'm disappointed. Overall, Gavin, I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I do not know, because, everybody knows the dude's going to make a run for president at some point. And like, at this point, I'm like, who in their right mind would want to have the year that Gavin Newsom just had and then be like, you know what I want? I want more. I want to be responsible for more shit. It's like, dude, nobody likes this dude, and he's run into like the fucking the age-old centrist Democrat thing where he like tries to please anybody, doesn't please anybody ever. So then like everybody on every side is mad at him. I do not know. Like, this dude if this dude makes an actual presidential run, he's like the hugest masochist. I don't know why anybody would want to do that after, I don't know. This guy's year.
It'll be interesting though, because I think people have short memories, and name recognition is the big determinant of your success later on in your career. And he's gaining that name recognition as as governor of the largest state in the union.
He is, but his name is also synonymous with recall. Like, I mean, even though they're fucking wingnuts, like the right wing has been really vocal about, like, recall Newsom, and Newsom is a Nazi and shit like that. And just purely in terms of name recognition, doesn't fucking help him out.
We'll see. I think he still has. We all have the lib friends that are like, oh, he handled coronavirus great. And during the beginning of this, they were like, oh, he's fucking amazing. And we were all like, you fucking kidding me? Like, no.
We're also pretty shallow. And so Newsom is a tall, good looking white guy. And that's going to get him a long way with a lot of voters. Like, and I think we're also recognizing that he's not trying to capture the right wing folks to vote for him. He just needs the establishment Democrats.
Right.
And these are the same people who thought Joe Biden was their best option this year. So I just want, like, I don't think it's a hard sell that the guy from California who has been vilified by the right wing for being too hard on the coronavirus, it could very well become the Democrats' champion
Guy,
in the
right.
next, yeah, that would not at all surprise me. Like, that's not even a plot twist. That's like, but of course they're gonna lay out the golden carpet or the
Right.
the red carpet for and the golden chariot for Gavin Newsom. Of course.
The opposite. It's like watching a movie and you're like, well, that's a little obvious, but okay.
Yeah, like, all right. Yeah.
Honestly, it'll almost, like, now that we pretty much have reached a point in this country where we have definitely all decided we will never have a good president, it is almost worth having somebody like Gavin Newsom just to see what the wingnut, like how the wingnuts will react, especially the California Republicans. If he actually succeeds, it'll almost be worth the entire thing.
Yeah. So folks, this guy who not only hasn't really done much, he also has, he's messed up plenty. He will be, first of all, given the immense amount of power of filling 3 offices, possibly 3, 2, possibly 3, U.S. Senator from California, Secretary of State of the state of California, and hopefully soon again, although depending on who he picks, maybe not hopefully, U.S. Senator from California if Di-Fi steps down. So folks, California, the best is yet to come. So it's a little callback.
Dave, I don't want to exaggerate a whole bunch, and I don't want to speak in hyperbole. And at the risk of doing that, I do have to say, though, while we're on the topic, that was a perfect take. And now that I've had a taste of what a perfect take sounds like, I need more. I can't go back to what my life was like before I had heard such a perfect take, which obviously comes with the downside that there's certainly no place on the internet that I can go where I can just fill up on perfect takes endlessly to a point, basically like a never-ending waterfall of perfect takes crashing down on me in a pleasing way.
Yeah.
Such a place surely doesn't exist anywhere on the internet, does it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The perfect take is akin to the Turkish delight. Once you get a taste, that's it. That's all you want after that. So let me take
delight?
Yeah. You never read the line Witch in the Wardrobe?
Oh my God, that is just, I was not expecting that today. That's all. I just was not expecting.
Flo has had it with us.
I was not expecting a Narnia reference.
Flo's on her final fucking thread with us. Let's see if we can get you through the last couple.
Oh my gosh.
So listeners, let me take you to the internet's Narnia, a little place called
Hell yeah.
voicesrivercity.com that is just filled with 3 years of perfect takes, one after the other. We started with a lot of news and arts coverage, a lot of other cool shit, community essays. The Sack Follows the Money Project current iteration, of course, is our podcast today. And there's plenty more perfect takes to come in 2021. Dare I say, even more perfecter than 2020.
Yep.
So buckle up, and it's going to be a really good time, I think. You can find us in other places of the internet. We are on Facebook, Voices River City. You can watch our little faces on our Tuesday episodes on YouTube as Voices River City. We are on all podcast platforms, Voices River City, on Twitter and Instagram as @Voices River City. Skylar runs the Instagram. It is fucking hilarious. And yeah, if you want to support us and get double the episodes every month, not just 4, but 8.
That's like almost an irresponsible amount of perfect takes.
Yeah, it
takes, you have to you got to work your way up to where you can handle that many perfect takes at that kind of a pace, you know.
If you're a first-time listener, I would really caution you to not ingest too many episodes at once. We don't want you to overdose on the perfect takes. But if you're one of the real ones and one of the pros, and you're starting to get it, and you suddenly find yourself spouting only perfect takes, that might be the time for you to hop onto patreon.com/voicesrivercity and become a patron for as low as $5 a month. And obviously, you know, we are hugely thankful for everybody who helps us do what we do, and, you know, pays for our newspaper subscriptions so we can rant about things that you're not able to read about, and you know, all the equipment and everything. It means a lot. So that's that. I am on Twitter at YouKnowKempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find me at Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
And I'm at Shan ND Stevens.
And I'm at Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
All right, guys. Well, that is this episode finished. So we will see you in a few days. In the meantime, we want you to know that we love you. We want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And stay the fuck away from me for at least the next 3 months. Like we're almost there. You're gonna get your vaccine, but until then, stay away.
Yeah, and hit me up if you want a vaccine a little earlier than that. That's fine. We can set that up.
Uh-oh.
Tyler.
Uh-oh.
Hank.